we go through hard times, very often we get in a situation where we just don't know where to turn. We don't know who to turn to. Well, today we're going to look in Psalm 9, and we're going to see where David turned when he was afflicted. We're going to see some interesting themes about challenging us to where our thought processes are in the midst of difficult times. And we're going to talk about that today when we come right back. Hi, and welcome to Bible Study with Friends, where our goal is to help you get more impact from your Bible study. I'm here with my friend Jerry Duckett, and Jerry and I will continue in the book of Psalms. We're up to Psalm 9. Are you ready to get into this, Jerry?
I'm ready.
Now, Psalm 9 is interesting for a couple of things. Traditionally, if you look at the Greek version of the Hebrew Old Testament, it's called the Septuagint because there were 70 Greek scholars. They were hired to basically translate the Hebrew into Greek so that Alexander and that period of time, the Greeks could read the Old Testament. And they translated Psalm 9 and 10 as a single psalm. But today we're going to look at the first half, Psalm 9, and then next week we'll look at Psalm 10. The other thing that's interesting, and it's kind of puzzling, is the superscription. Let's look at this together. First thing we notice in our study is the superscription. And in this case, it says, for the choir director on Muthlaban. Now, Muthlaban translates in the Hebrew, if you look up that little cross right there, and if you go up here to look, it basically means death to the son, S-O-N.
Okay. I looked it up.
And it means death to the psalm. And then it says a psalm of David. And the psalm has got a spirit of joy to it. And you go, well, how does instructions to the choir director to use a song that says to the death of the son? You know, one of the things that makes sense to me, and we'll see this, Psalm 9 is talking about God's judgment on behalf of the afflicted, right, on behalf of people that are going through tough times. And it could have been written, we don't know this for sure, but it could have been written after David is saved from Absalom and David gets his kingdom back. And during that period where Absalom was out to kill him, David really went through some tough times.
Right.
And this could be a celebration of what happened. And then the tune, hey, choir director, play this to this tune of to the death of the son,
right,
would have been after the death of Absalom. And there was a certain amount of sadness, but also a certain amount of joy in the fact that he got his kingdom back and was restored in that situation. So that's my take on that, Jerry. And it's the only thing that makes a whole lot of sense to me about directions to sing this psalm to the song, The Death of the Son.
Yeah, I went through the same thing. I kept reading about it and cross-referencing and stuff, and I was reading it literally, and instead I had to look at what that meant to them.
Yeah.
And it helped to clarify. It made sense to me when I read that.
And we're going to see that as we go through here. What is on their minds, what's going on in the service where David wrote this song to be sung in a worship service in the tabernacle, and what's going on. And this psalm is really great because it gives us a real vision of a worship service with action. And we'll talk about that as we go here. Let's get into it. Let's read the first verse, just the first verse, Jerry. Go ahead.
Okay. I will give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonders.
Okay, now, let me ask this question. The first phrase, who is he talking to?
He's talking to the congregation.
Right. I put a little bracket over here and I said, to us, right?
Right.
But halfway through the verse, he switches.
Yeah.
I will tell of all your wonders is talking to God. And he talks to God now for the next few verses. But we need to really watch in this psalm the movement, because here the priest would have his back to the Lord and be facing the congregation. And he would say, I will give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. And then he turns, looks
right.
up, and raises his arms and says, I will tell of all your wonders. And he's off with a prayer.
Right.
So we're going to watch through this whole psalm the movement of who is being talked to. All right. So we'll watch that as we go. Now, the other thing we'll notice is the tenses. From verse 1 and 2, we have I will, I will, I will, I will. All right. So I put
Yes.
over here on the left, this is my commitment to praise. This is me saying to the congregation, I will take action. I will do something. I will give thanks is the beginning. So that's a commitment to thanksgiving. I will tell is a commitment to give testimony. I'm going
Right.
to tell people about all God's wonders in my life. The word wonders could also be miracles, by the way. And then down here, in verse 2, he says, I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High.
Yes.
Now, if we look back to verse 2, what does the word exalt mean? I will exalt you.
High esteem.
Okay? To esteem highly, you could almost say it means to put on a pedestal.
Right.
To exalt means that. It comes from a Hebrew word, halal. Does that sound familiar? What English word do you know that sounds like halal? How about hallelujah?
Hallelujah. Yes.
See?
Yes.
Halal. The idea of I will be glad and will exult is this idea of I will praise with joy God on high.
Right.
And I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. And then he goes, I'll sing to your name, and your name is O Most High. Okay. So he kind of answers that old question. And then the prayer continues, but it switches to a different tense. I want you to read verse 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. When my enemies turn back, they stumble and perish before you, for you have maintained my just cause. You have sat on the throne, judging righteously. You have rebuked the nations, and you have destroyed the wicked. You have blotted out their names forever and ever.
Okay, now the term you have is a term of you have accomplished this. So up above, you have I will do some things. I will give thanks. I will praise. I'll give testimony of you, Lord. And then from verse 3 down to verse 6 is how God responds to that praise and that thanksgiving. So it says, because I prayed, you have maintained my just cause. You have maintained my correct actions. You have sat on the throne judging righteously. You judge correctly my attitude and the people that I'm praying about that have given me a hard time. Verse 5, you have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. It's a done deal. You have blotted out their name forever and ever.
Right.
And then verse 6, we're going to switch here. The enemy has come to an end in perpetual ruins. That's this, you've blotted out their name forever and ever. And the enemy has come to an end. It's over for them because God is acting. The rest of verse 6 is, you have uprooted the cities. This is all part of you've destroyed them. The very memory of them has perished. You've completely wiped them out. And because you've taken that action, I can even more praise you. At first, I praise you, give you thanks. I will tell of your testimonies. And your response is, you have done all these things on my behalf, including the word judgment. Now, I did in green here the word judgment because the word judgment is used 6 times in these 20 verses. So it's kind of a theme of God's judgment. And there are bad judgments. When God judges the wicked, he judges them and he destroys them. He moves against them. But there's also judgment for benefits. There's good judgment for those who are not wicked. And let's look at that because that's this next section. I put a bracket here that said judgment benefits from verse 7 down to verse 10. Read verse 7.
But the Lord abides forever. He has established his throne for judgment.
Now, who is he talking to?
He's talking to the congregation.
Yeah, see how it switched? In verse
Right.
6, he's talking to God. You have done this, you have done this, you have done this. And all of a sudden, he turns to the audience and he's talking about God, not to God.
Right.
But the
Right.
Lord abides forever. Basically, that word is he stays, he dwells forever. He
Mhm.
has established his throne, and the purpose for the throne is judgment. Now, when it says the Lord abides forever, that's present tense. He has established his throne for judgment, that's past tense.
That's past tense.
And then he will judge is future tense.
Yes.
So now we saw up above, we saw you have done this, you have done this. Now he's talking to the congregation about what God will do in the future.
Hmm.
In verse 8, he says, you will judge the world. In righteousness is you will judge the world rightly. Up above in verse 4, he talked about your judgment is righteous. And then verse 8 continues, he will execute judgment for the peoples with equity. In other words, equally.
Right.
He's going to be fair in his judgment. And then he says in verse 9, the Lord also will be a stronghold for the oppressed and a stronghold in time of troubles. Now, what is a stronghold, Jerry? That's a term we don't use very often today.
Right. Stronghold would be your point of strength, your rock, basically, that you're.
Okay, you're on the right track. A stronghold was if you took a castle, there would be inside the walls of the castle would
That-
be maybe another wall, whatever.
That'd be
But
your stronghold.
ultimately, right in the middle of the castle would be a stronghold. And the stronghold was where you ran if the outer walls fell and the inner walls were starting to fall. You'd run to the stronghold that you could hold out there
Mhm.
for a long time
Right.
against enormous odds. It was a place of safety that you could run to.
Yes.
Now, if you put that in the context of those verses, look what it says. If we look at verse 9 again, the Lord also will be a place for you to run for the oppressed and a place of safety in times of trouble. Now, I put those in red because that's a great verse to memorize because we all face trouble. It's good to know that he is a stronghold I can run to when I'm facing times of trouble.
Right.
And then verse 10 says, those who know your name will put their trust in you. I put faith real big there. Because remember last Psalm, in Psalm 8,
Mm-hmm.
oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth.
Right.
And in verse 10 here, he's saying, the people who know you and know your name, the name Yahweh, will put their trust in you.
Mm-hmm.
So these are believers.
Right.
Okay. They will put their trust in you. That's future tense. And then at the end of that verse in 10 says, because you, O Lord, and the word Lord there is Yahweh, oh, you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. That is
Yes.
present tense. So I'm going to trust you, and I know your name. And because of that, you don't forsake me right now in the
Yes.
midst of my troubled times. Verse
Mhm.
9, times of trouble, you do not forsake me because I know who you are and I put my trust in who
In
you
you.
are. Do you see that?
Yes.
9 goes, the Lord also will be a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Verse 10, and those who know your name will put their trust in you. You see the switch?
Right.
It went from talking about the Lord to the congregation. Now it's back to praying. And I put a little bracket over here that said, verse 10 is a prayer to God. For you, O Lord, have not, if this was still talking to the congregation, you'd say, but the Lord does not forsake those who seek him. But it's, O Lord, you do not forsake those who seek you. So this is a prayer.
Yeah, it's future tense.
Yep. Now, you go up here. Let's look at these next verses. Read verse 11 and 12.
Sing praise to the Lord who dwells in Zion, declare among the people his deeds. For he who requires blood remembers them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted.
Okay, now, if you look at that again, that's back to verse 10 is a prayer to God. Verse 11 and 12, he's talking about God. I sing praises to the Lord. If he was still praying, he'd say, I sing praises to you.
Right.
So he switches back to talking to the congregation again. And it talked about he who requires blood. That is a little number there. Basically, it's he who requires blood as a result of wickedness. He avenges bloodshed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he does not forget the cry of the afflicted. And I put a circle around that because the afflicted is really the focus. God's response to the afflicted, to people who are afflicted with hard times. Okay?
Yes.
Now, verse 13 and 14, I want to read because 11 and 12 is to the congregation. Then he goes back to prayer. Verse 13, be gracious to me, O Lord. So if you train yourself, you'll get this movement in the worship service between turning to the congregation and turning to the Lord in prayer. So he prays, and this is an explanation of what the cry of the afflicted in verse 12. It says, you do not forget the cry of the afflicted. Well, this is the cry of the afflicted. And this is, I circled it because it's a great place to go when you're in personal hard times. And you pray this prayer, be gracious to me, O Lord. See my affliction from those who hate me, you who lift me up from the gates of death, that I may tell of all your praises, that in the gates of the daughter of Zion I may rejoice in your salvation. That's testimony. That's back to what he said in verse 2. I will tell and I will praise you. I will rejoice in your salvation is basically a reiteration of what he said in verse 1 and 2. So that's a great prayer for us. If we circle that and put in our notes that when we're having a hard time, when somebody is bullying us, somebody's coming after us, somebody's whatever, we can go to that verse and pray that and pray, Lord, to give me grace and see my affliction, the affliction from those who hate me, you who lift me up from the gates of death. This feels like it's going to kill me. And you do that, lift me up from that so that I will tell of all your praises, so that in the gates of the daughter of Zion, I will rejoice in your salvation. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then the end of the psalm switches back again to not talking to the Lord, but talking about him, because you see that in verse 16. So the nations, this is God's judgment against the evil nations. And we know they're evil because he calls them wicked. Verse 15 and 16, the nations have sunk down in the pit which they have made, in the net which they hid. Their own foot has been caught. That is mentioned a lot of times in Psalms and Proverbs both, where it talks about the wicked people lay a trap for the righteous people
And get caught in.
they're caught in their own trap.
Right.
God boomerangs their trap back on them and judges them for their actions against his people. So we see in 16, the Lord has made himself known. He has executed judgment. There's that theme again, right?
Yes.
And he has executed judgment in the work of his own hands. The wicked is snared. Now, his own hands is not capitalized. So this is not the work of God's hands. This is the work of the wicked's own hands. You see that?
Yes.
So in verse 17, still talking to us, the wicked will return to the dead place, Sheol.
Sheol.
Even all the nations who forget God, for the needy will not always be forgotten, nor hope of the afflicted perish forever. In other words, the people who are afflicted put their hope in God, and they will not perish forever. God is going to respond, and he's going to respond with judgment. In fact, verse 19 is back to a prayer, and if the prayer is, arise, O Lord. That's a prayer that he prays a lot,
Right.
as a kind of a war cry for God to take action. Arise, O Lord, do not let man prevail. Let the nations be judged before you. Put them in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know that they are but men. Now, I want to come back to verse 20 in a second, but if you notice in verse 19 and 20, what actions does David take? He's got enemies that are persecuting him. He is feeling afflicted because of them, because of these enemies. He prays, but what actions does he take in verse 19 and 20?
He's asking the Lord, "Rise, O Lord, and do not let the man prevail."
Okay, does David take any action at all?
No,
He doesn't say, strengthen me so I can smash him.
right,
No. He is not going to take matters into his own hand. He's going to trust that God will do it on his behalf.
right.
Do you see that?
Yes,
So he's praying, you take the action that needs to be taken to benefit me against my enemies.
yes.
So we have a situation in our lives where we may be being bullied or somebody's picking on us, or somebody even in our own family takes every opportunity to belittle you, to try to trip you up, to maybe tempt you to sin. Well, you don't take action against them.
Right.
You pray and let the Lord take action.
Yes.
You say, Lord, you judge them. You take action against them. I'm just going to trust you, and I'm going to give you praise, and I'm going to tell all your wondrous works, your miracles on my behalf. I will tell people about it and give you praise and thanks in the midst of my affliction.
Yes.
And that's something we can take to the bank. We need to ask the basic question back to verse 10. Do I know his name, and do I trust that he's God and I'm not?
Right.
That's a question for all of us to think about. Oh, no, I need to take matters into my own hands. Well, then you're not trusting God to do it. You need to trust God and be patient and say, arise, O Lord, on my behalf. Judge them on my behalf. I'm going to wait and trust that you'll take action. And I really like verse 20, because verse 20 is how to pray for the wicked in your life. You see the last phrase of verse 20?
Right.
Go ahead and read it.
Put them in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know that they are but men.
Okay, now, what does that mean? Let them know that they are but men.
You're weak compared to God.
Okay. And so that would be a way of saying, let them know they're not God.
They're in trouble.
They're just men.
Right.
And a lot of times the wicked think they're God.
Right.
They think they're more powerful than God. They think they can get away with anything because they're their own little gods.
Yeah, no consequences.
So the prayer is, Lord, remind them that they're just men and you're not. Okay. Now, I like to put it in that saying, God is God and you are not, my friend. You know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Remind them that they're not God. Remind them that you're God and that you're the judge of correct action and wicked action. And that's a prayer I need to be able to pray. Lord, I know your name. I trust in you. You take action on my behalf, and you remind the people that are coming against me that you're God and they're not. Now, if you notice the themes of this psalm, there are repeated words. The repeated words are judgment, and the other repeated words are afflicted. And then there's one little statement that says, the Lord's going to look out for you in times of trouble.
Right.
When you're afflicted with times of trouble, God is going to judge. He's going to judge the wicked, and he's also going to judge to the benefit of you who are trusting in his name. So good study, Jerry, and it's good that you got you thinking, and you're doing well with thinking about who is this psalm talking to, because he switches. In the middle of a verse, it'll switch from talking to the congregation to talking to the Lord, back to the congregation. You really got to pay attention, but it brings the psalm alive and gives a lot of action to what's going on.
Yeah, you don't notice that if you're just reading through it, you don't think about that.
But if you train yourself to pay attention, then it really helps the psalm come alive for you. And
well, my biggest issue, I've had to learn to slow down and listen to what I'm reading.
yeah,
Just
listen to what it actually says,
exactly,
not what you think it ought to say.
where
I fall into that trap all the time, as do many of us. But anyway, Hope you enjoyed this. We're going to get into the other half, Psalm 10, next week. Well, thanks for watching. I want to recommend a video to you. It's called Remembering God's Character in Hard Times. It's out of the 3rd chapter of the book of Habakkuk, and I think you'll enjoy it. And if you do, be sure to hit the like button. That helps us with YouTube. And listen, we're going to continue in Psalms next week. And until then, God bless you.